commute to work every single day and you're paying all this money and you can't.
It's so expensive. You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 9:30 on Monday, the 11th of November, Armistice Day. Live across the United Kingdom, this is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, who are broadcasting live from the Cenotaph in central London. So Keir Starmer is the first British Prime Minister since Churchill to mark Armistice Day in Paris, as Britain falls silent at 11 a.m. to remember our fallen soldiers. Yesterday, there were emotional scenes at the Cenotaph. King Charles led the nation in commemorating those who died in conflict during the Remembrance Sunday service.
Doing this kind of thing, it's like being part of a family, and that's what it is. It's like being part of a family. You're not secular. You're not on your own, and it's great.
I always want to cry in remembering my youthful friends who were killed.
And elsewhere, a very welcome royal return. The Princess of Wales was joined by Duchess Sophie at the Cenotaph as she made 2 appearances on consecutive days for the first time this year. And banished to the balcony, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage slams the establishment for not being able to lay a wreath at the Cenotaph yesterday. That's as the rule states parties must have 6 MPs to take part in the ceremony. Elsewhere, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaks to Patrick Christie's tonight at 9 p.m. as he addresses migration numbers surging during his premiership. Take a listen.
But never forget, it was we who controlled it, because we took back control with Brexit. And in future years, we can say no.
The one you've all been waiting for, I bet. World leaders are heading to Azerbaijan for COP29, the annual UN climate meeting, to tackle climate change. But will a Donald Trump presidency threaten their green ambitions? Talking of Trump, he gets tough. It's understood the president-elect has warned Russian President Vladimir Putin not to escalate the war in Ukraine in a post-election phone call. Very good morning to you. Thank you for your company on this very special episode of Britain's Newsroom. Andrew and Bev will be live at the Cenotaph very shortly. We'd love to hear what you think as well about all of the commemorations over the past couple of days. gbnews.com/your say. First, your news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Ben, thank you and good morning. These are your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. The nation will fall silent later this morning to mark Armistice Day, honouring the moment peace was declared in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month with a 2-minute silence. A service will take place at the Cenotaph in London, where wreaths will be laid, and senior representatives of the Armed Forces and the Ministry of Defence will attend a service at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. The King led commemorations yesterday at the Cenotaph, where he was joined by members of the royal family and senior politicians. Our reporter, Charlie Peters, spoke to the Honorary President of the Western Front Association, Lady Lucy French, earlier on.
For me, it is incredibly important. It's vital that we do continue to remember, that we do fall silent at 11 o'clock. It's part of humanity. And the instance that we begin to forget, well,
the Prime Minister is marking Armistice Day in France today, becoming the first UK leader to do so since Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Keir Starmer is in Paris on the personal invitation of French President Emmanuel Macron. The Prime Minister is expected to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at the Arc de Triomphe and at memorials near the Champs-Élysées. It comes as the government announces more than £10 million to mark the 80th anniversaries of VE and VJ Day in the UK next year. Sir Keir and President Macron will also discuss the wars in Ukraine and Gaza and President Trump's threat of trade tariffs. Minister for Veterans, Alistair Cairns, spoke to Eamon and Isabel a short while ago.
Well, I think going out there makes absolute sense from my perspective. The war was fought in France, so being alongside the French to remember those that have fallen is fantastic news. And I fully support it. I had the privilege yesterday of marching for the first time in the front rank of veterans past the cenotaph. And it's a moment for this country to reflect and remember the sacrifices of so many people who laid down their lives to protect the freedoms we enjoy. So the PM going over to France is a good thing to stand along the French and remember the sacrifice that took place.
To the US, where Donald Trump has held a phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss the war in Ukraine. That's according to the Washington Post. US media is reporting that Trump warned Putin not to escalate the conflict. It comes as Joe Biden is reportedly set to make a personal plea to Donald Trump about the importance of funding Ukraine, urging the president-elect not to walk away from the country. Elsewhere, Defence Secretary John Healey has rejected reported comments by Ukrainian officials suggesting that Kyiv is unhappy with the Labour government's level of support. It comes after The Guardian reported that officials in Kyiv have said that relations have deteriorated since Labour took office, and they voiced frustration over Britain's failure to provide additional long-range weapons. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now, let's go back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK on GB News with Andrew and Bev down at the Cenotaph this morning.
Very important day, of course, because it is Armistice Day as we pay tribute to our fallen heroes. A 2-minute silence will descend here across the nation to mark the moment peace was declared in 1918.
That's right. There's going to be a ceremony here about 10:45 this morning. Several dignitaries will be down. Not like yesterday, of course. Today will be very much about showing respect here at the Cenotaph, as we say, on the 11th of the 11th at the 11th hour. We are joined now by our guest, our first guest this morning, Mr. Justin Machowski, DSO MBE, Director of the National Army Museum. I don't know if I got your name. Brigadier Justin.
You're the Brigadier.
Absolutely, that's right, Ben.
Yeah.
Tell us about the National Army Museum, because forgive our ignorance, obviously it's very important, and it records the history of the Army, I think, from the restoration of the monarchy after the dreaded Oliver Cromwell died, right up until the modern day.
That's correct. We tell the story of our soldiers and the armies in which they served across the world and down the centuries. And of course, this is a story of soldiers from right across the world. Britain, obviously, Ireland, and the former empire, now the Commonwealth. So there are the stories of soldiers from about 55 countries that are told at the National Army Museum in Chelsea.
And how important is it, Brigadier, that we still continue to reflect Armistice Day at 11 o'clock on the 11th and the 11th?
I think it's incredibly important. Obviously, Armistice Day and the remembrance of, as we know it today, emerged from the First World War and the trauma of the First World War, but also the victory of the First World War. This was service and sacrifice for this nation and the freedoms we enjoy today. And so I think today is a day to, again, reflect on what it means to defend what we stand for through history, and what that involves in terms of sacrifice. It's not just about people dying, although obviously that's tragic for every family that's lost people, and of course losses continue since the First World War, but it's about what that sacrifice means, and it means giving to others.
Justin, do you think a life in the military is appealing these days to the younger generation? It's on days like this that we remember how important it is that we have those troops at our service, but does it appeal to the younger generation?
Well, I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I've got 2 sons in the army, and they love it.
Sell it.
They love it. They've got great friends. They have a great sense of purpose, a great sense of belonging, and they believe passionately in their mission of defending this country. So if it doesn't appeal to some people to want to serve, then we really are in trouble.
Would you like to see national service being brought back?
Do you know, the history of our army since 1660 is overwhelmingly a story of volunteers. I think there are only 26 years since 1660 that we have had compulsory service, and it's worth reflecting that when the Battle of the Somme started, the army was overwhelmingly volunteers. We only had conscription in the last 2 years of the First World War. So we produced an army of more than 1 million people purely from volunteers from this country. Scout leaders, librarians, people from all over society joined the army in 1914 because they believed in what we had to do to stop Germany in 1914.
And what state is our army now? Because we are still a major military power, or we think we are. I mean, I'm not going to drag you into politics, but about whether we should be spending 2.5% of GDP or 3%, but is the British Army still one of the finest in the world?
We've not been spending enough on defence for many years. There's no doubt about it. From a historical point of view, I can speak as a historian.
Yeah.
We are not historically spending enough on defence. I'm also Polish, as you'll see from my name, and my family are Polish. And of course, we're on the front line of NATO in Poland. And of course, Poland is massively increasing defences. This country needs to wake up and smell the coffee.
And Poland is massively increasing its defences because they're concerned about the activities of Putin next door.
Absolutely.
And what's going on in Ukraine.
Absolutely.
And we've got a new president coming into the United States in a few months' time who may want to pull the plug on defence spending for Ukraine. How would you feel about that?
I think what I'd like to do is just from a historical point of view, if you look at the tectonic plates and how they're shifting around the world is becoming more uncertain. And so without getting drawn into any sort of politics, all I would say is it's really important that Britain, as one of the leading nations in the Security Council, stands up and dedicates sufficient resource to ensure that our country is secure. And that is the lesson of history. So what I'm speaking about here is history and what history tells us.
You were here yesterday, Justin, were you, presumably?
No, I wasn't here yesterday.
No,
I was in our local parish.
I was going to say, how did you spend yesterday?
Well, in fact, the weekend has been dedicated to a number of remembrance events. I was at an event on Friday reflecting on what remembrance means for us as a society, where the armed forces, politics and society all come together one day a year on a Sunday to really reflect on what it means to serve and the sacrifice involved and how we need to remember. And yesterday, to be honest, I was much more reflecting on my own personal experience. I had the great privilege of commanding the 2nd Rifles Battle Group in Basra in 2006 and 2007, and it was a tough tour. We lost 23 soldiers within Basra during the period that we were there, and we were under fire every single day. And the soldiers were extraordinary. The courage, the bravery, the commitment, and the selflessness of those soldiers is something I'll never forget. And obviously, yesterday I was very much thinking about those comrades that we didn't bring home and lost their lives in Iraq.
Do you think on Armistice Day we think enough about soldiers and servicemen and women who were involved in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Falklands, or do we preoccupy too much on the Second World War when we consider now very few of those men and women are left?
Yes. I mean, remembrance was born out of the First World War, and we should never forget that. But of course it's a living thing, and of course there are thousands of people around the country, family, loved ones, for whom this is a very difficult time of year, when they're remembering the loss of their sons, their daughters, their husbands, their wives, their mums, their dads. And I think it's important to make sure that remembrance remains relevant. We've got to make sure we don't just have it rooted in history, that we remember today of all those people living with loss. And so, yes, I agree with you, that we need to make sure it's seen as a contemporary thing and not just a historical act of remembrance.
And we should take may call our kids down to the National Army Museum in Chelsea to educate them.
Yeah.
You're right. Remembrance should not be confined just to one day a year.
Just before you go, as you're an historian, what do you think about the fact that Keir Starmer was the first British Prime Minister since Churchill in 1944 to be on arms state in France?
Well, of course, the First World War was an incredible British-French endeavour, along with other allies. I think it's rather wonderful that our Prime Minister is in France with the French President on this day.
It's odd it's not happened since 1944.
It is strange, isn't it? But I think actually remembrance, particularly November remembrance, is something that is growing in many different countries in Europe. Many different countries are really reactivating the idea of flowers that represent their country and remembrance. And in many ways, remembrance, the way we do it in this country, has inspired other countries to also do it in a similar way. And I think remembrance as an act is something that we're going to see grow right across the Western world. And I think the more we can remember together, the better.
OK. All right, Justin, thank you. Brigadier Justin Maciejewski there, MBE Director at the National Army Museum.
Well, I'm going to come and visit
Chelsea.
We should go together.
Have a little day out.
I think we should. I think we need to have a little GB News film made at the museum.
Up next, we're going to be checking in across Britain to see how other cities are marking Armistice Day. You are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
But it turns out there's a growing number of grandparents who are now taking up the hobby.
And not all of them are male. 7 million gamers are aged over 50, 7 million of them. And we're going to introduce you to one this morning. Her name's Kath Bowie. She's 76 years of age, and Kath has become a worldwide star of the game Fortnite. Good to see you, Kath.
Hello, good morning to both of you.
Morning. And tell me this, Kath, is Bowie your real name?
Bowie. Yeah.
Bowie.
Yes, it is my real name, yes.
And you do it a Bowie and not a Bowie?
It's a Bowie, yes, definitely Bowie, yes.
Bowie or Bowie?
Bowie.
Bowie.
But that's not what the Jim Bowie was called, or Jim Bowie was called in the Alamo. He was a Bowie.
No, but that's what I'm called, Kath Bowie.
Oh,
She's their own superstar.
You are your own superstar. You are indeed. Well, so we're led to believe, Kath, that there's nobody else like you, or very few people like you, but there is. There is lots of people your age, your stage, doing what you do.
Yes, there's not a lot that streams. OK, Fortnite, but there's definitely plenty that plays. Any game, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be Fortnite. It can be any game.
So Kath, how did you get started in all of this?
Oh, yeah, well, it's 7 years ago, actually. I walked into my teenage grandson's bedroom and just saw him playing what I now know, of course, what I play is Fortnite. And that was the very first week that Epic had released it. And it was just really love at first sight.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 9:48. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I believe we're going to go now to see Jack Carson. We're going to be bringing you all the live coverage of commemorations throughout the day. And here is Jack, our West Midlands reporter from the National Memorial Arboretum. What is the mood there this morning, Jack?
Yeah, good morning to you. Well, preparations still underway here at the National Memorial Arboretum for that Armistice Day service, but this is the poignant part of this Armed Forces Memorial. Over 16,000 names are on here, and if we just look up here, these are some of the most recent names that have been added. Here in 2021, G. Henderson from the Royal Air Force, MJ Farah as well. And if we come round, what you can see is where wreaths are consistently laid, where flowers, poppy crosses also consistently laid. These are the names on the wall from the likes of 2007 and other years. These are people who lost their lives in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in other conflicts. As I mentioned, there are thousands and thousands of names, and the names, the years on this memorial start after World War II, after 1945, really putting into perspective how many people have still lost their lives, still given that sacrifice after the Second World War. Come through here, there is a slit in the wall of, and if we come through here, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the sunlight directly shines through this memorial and lights up that wreath in the middle of the Armed Forces Memorial. That is where the wreaths will be laid this morning as part of that Remembrance Day service here at the National Memorial Arboretum. It's always a poignant moment and a point at which this place will reflect, but also as well across the country here today on Armistice Day at the 11th hour.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. So, GB News Scotland. Now, reporter Tony Maguire is joining us from the Scott Monument in Edinburgh. Morning, Tony.
Just as important. Starts now. Good morning. I am here in Edinburgh, and I'm joined today by Claire Armstrong OBE, who is the CEO, I think, of the Royal British Legion in Scotland. So, Claire, thank you for joining me on this glorious Scottish day this morning. The sun is shining, and we're expecting hundreds of people to come out today to pay their respects in this glorious garden of remembrance just behind me. So what can we expect to see today when they come and join us?
Well, this morning we're looking forward to having lots of veterans and people from the local community here with us to join to mark the 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock. So we'll stop with the rest of the news across the country to pay our respect, reflect and take that personal time. We'll have the Lord Provost with us and other representatives. A few wreaths will be laid this morning, and we'll just have a short service and take that opportunity to be together and stand shoulder to shoulder.
And I know that this morning we're going to have some pipes playing some lovely music for us as well. But we were talking just before we came on air there about, not everybody has a member of the family or a loved one who are in the services. But year after year, we're seeing more and more people come out to pay their respects to these events. Why do you think that is? That, and how important is it that people take those couple of hours in their year to do that?
I think it's hugely important. I mean, not everyone is necessarily able to stand here today and remember someone in particular, but I think what's really important is everybody gathers together to remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice, those that have gone before, those that we have to thank for the world that we live in today. So that is hugely important, that continues and that everybody recognises that across the country.
Now, you're CEO of RBL Scotland, so across the country, I imagine there's lots of little regional interpretations of today. Could you tell us about some of them in kind of some of our more far-flung corners of Britain?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of war memorials. If we think of Scotland in particular, over 5,000, so there'll be a lot of different things happening this morning. It can be anything from just a couple of people gathered together to mark that silence to larger gatherings. Music might be involved, maybe not, poetry, spoken word. It's a very personal thing all over the Remembrance Weekend, and especially today, deeply personal. So everyone will remember in their own way, and I think that's wonderful that we've got that variation. It doesn't have to be one set format. They can come and remember as they see fit.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Claire Armstrong, thank you so much. We are going to be here through the morning to bring you pictures as the day progresses, and we expect quite a large, sizable turnout here today in Edinburgh for Armistice Day.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. Tony Maguire there up in Scotland. It is a cold but beautiful day here, actually, in Westminster. The cenotaph here, if you saw the coverage yesterday, you can see the wreaths behind us that were obviously laid by King Charles, Kemi Badenoch, Sir Keir Starmer, a lot of the dignitaries here this morning. You can see some of the troops are standing here now at the moment. There will be a ceremony of sorts at 10:45, a much more toned-down version, obviously,
and lots of veterans here to pay their respects, because it is Armistice Day, 11 o'clock on the 11th, when peace was signed in 1918. Remarkable, and it's important to be here because we should always remember. We should never forget them.
Yeah, this country is important. People who defend it are incredibly important. Don't go anywhere. Here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a cloudy few days, there is some blue sky on the way as we head through the rest of this week. High pressure still very much in charge of our weather as we head over the next couple of days, bringing us those more settled conditions that we might see throughout today with plenty of sunshine around. We have seen a weather front just sinking southwards overnight, that eventually clearing the far southeast of England, and perhaps one or two showers just skirting the eastern coast of England as well. But for most of us, a dry and bright day with plenty of blue skies and plenty of sunshine on offer. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, but still feeling very pleasant in that sunshine. As we then go into Monday evening, still just a touch of cloud across the very far southwest of England, but for the majority of Scotland it will be staying dry with plenty of clear skies overnight, maybe one or two isolated showers just affecting Shetland and Orkney through the evening period. And across Northern Ireland, still staying dry overnight as well, plenty of clear spells here, and across Northern England and Northern Ireland we could see some patchy mist and fog developing during the early hours of Tuesday. For Wales and southern and central parts of England though, another dry night, plenty of clear spells around, still one or two showers just skirting the very far east of England, but for most places it should be staying dry overnight. As we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning, that's when we start to see that mist and fog developing across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England and Scotland too, as we go into the start of Tuesday. And temperatures overnight under those clear skies likely to be dropping a bit chillier than we've seen recently, down into the low single figures, with a bit of a frost likely across the northern half of the UK to start on Tuesday. So a chilly start for many places, but mostly a dry start. Some of that mist and fog perhaps a little slow to clear across Northern Ireland, but for most of us it will be another dry day. Plenty of sunshine around, still some showers just lingering across the very far southeast of England, these perhaps turning heavy at times, but temperatures will be similar again on Tuesday, around about average for the time of year, so 11 or 12 in the south and 10 or 11 further north.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A96 is closed in both directions west of Forres after an accident causing queues. In Tyne and Wear on the A19, there's a lane closed northbound with an accident between the Herrington interchange and New Herrington. Slope towards and past there. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed eastbound just after junction 25 at Brighouse, where someone's broken down, causing queues. Buses replaced trains between Hensford and Rugeley Trent Valley because of overhead line problems. In Herefordshire, the A480 is closed in both directions at Holmes Marsh after an accident causing queues. In Pembrokeshire, the A4219 is closed each way off the A40 southwest of Fishguard after an accident yesterday evening. And Penzance helicopter flights to and from the Isles of Scilly are currently on hold, and that's because of poor visibility. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
There's only 2 weeks remaining to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And A festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is me, is it?
Yeah, cool.
Very good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 11th of November. It is Armistice Day, of course. You might be able to just hear Big Ben behind us. Andrew and Bev here, bringing you a solemn occasion here at the Cenotaph in London.
And a bit of history too, because Sir Keir Starmer is the first British Prime Minister since Winston Churchill to mark Armistice Day in Paris, with the French President Macron as Britain falls silent at 11 a.m. to remember our fallen. Yesterday, of course, there were emotional scenes here at the Cenotaph behind us.
King Charles led the nation in commemorating those who have died in conflict during the Remembrance Sunday service. These veterans explain why the ceremony remains so important.
Doing this kind of thing, it's like being part of a family, and that's what it is. It's like being part of a family. You're not secular. You're not on your own, and it's great.
I always want to cry in remembering my youthful friends who were killed.
And royal return. The Princess of Wales was joined by the Duchess, by Sophie Wessex, at the Cenotaph, as she made 2 appearances on consecutive days for the first time this year, 2 public appearances.
And banished to the balcony, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has slammed the establishment for not being able to lay a wreath at the Cenotaph yesterday, as the rules state that parties must have 6 MPs to take part.
And elsewhere, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaks to Patrick Christys tonight at 9 p.m. as he addresses migration numbers surging during his premiership. Take a listen to what he has to say.
But never forget, it was we who controlled it, because we took back control with Brexit. And in future years, we can say no.
And the one you've been waiting for, world leaders are heading to Azerbaijan for COP29, the annual UN climate meeting to tackle climate change. But will a Trump presidency threaten their green ambitions?
I have to say, on COP29, world leaders are not going, actually, Bev. Biden's not going, Macron's not going, Scholz isn't going, the head of the European Commission is going. But don't worry, Keir Starmer's going. That's all right then.
He's in France today on Armistice Day. We'd like to know whether you think that is where he should be. GBNews.com/your say. First, the very latest news with Katie Bowen.
Bev, Andrew, thank you and good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Katie Bowen in the GB Newsroom. The nation will fall silent later this morning to mark Armistice Day, honouring the moment peace was declared in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month with a 2-minute silence. A service will take place at the Cenotaph in London, where wreaths will be laid, and senior representatives of the Armed Forces and the Ministry of Defence will attend a service at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. The King led commemorations yesterday at the Cenotaph, where he was joined by members of the royal family and senior politicians. Our reporter, Charlie Peters, spoke to a veteran earlier on.
For me, it is incredibly important. It's vital that we do continue to remember, that we do fall silent at 11 o'clock. It's part of humanity. And the instant that we begin to forget, well, I think we're all in trouble.
Well, the Prime Minister is marking Armistice Day in France today, becoming the first UK leader to do so since Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Keir Starmer is in Paris on the personal invitation of French President Emmanuel Macron. The Prime Minister is expected to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at the Arc de Triomphe and memorials near the Champs-Élysées. It comes as the government announces more than £10 million to mark the 80th anniversaries of VE and VJ Day next year. Sir Keir and President Macron will also discuss the wars in Ukraine and Gaza and President Trump's threat of trade tariffs. Minister for Veterans, Alistair Cairns, spoke to Eamon and Isabel a short while ago.
Well, I think going out there makes absolute sense from my perspective. The war was fought in France, so being alongside the French to remember those that have fallen is fantastic news. And I fully support it. I had the privilege yesterday of marching for the first time in the front rank of veterans past the Cenotaph. And it's a moment for this country to reflect and remember the sacrifices of so many people who laid down their lives to protect the freedoms we enjoy. So the PM going over to France is a good thing to stand along the French and remember the sacrifice that took place.
Some brief breaking news now. The Kremlin has denied this morning reports that US President-elect Donald Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and they cast the media reports as pure fiction. The Washington Post and Reuters news agency both previously reported that the call had taken place. It comes as Joe Biden is reportedly set to make a personal plea to Donald Trump about the importance of funding Ukraine, urging the president-elect not to walk away from the country. Elsewhere, Defence Secretary John Healey has rejected reported comments by Ukrainian officials, suggesting that Kyiv is unhappy with the Labour government's level of support. It comes after The Guardian reported officials in Kyiv have said relations have deteriorated since Labour took office and voiced frustration over Britain's failure to provide additional long-range weapons. More than 2 million GP appointments are at risk from changes made to national insurance in the Chancellor's budget, new analysis from the Liberal Democrats shows. The Institute of General Practice Management has estimated that the average GP surgery's tax bill will go up by around £20,000 a year after Rachel Reeves increased employers' national insurance contributions. That would amount to more than £125 million a year in additional costs for GP practices, the equivalent cost of providing 2.24 million appointments. The NHS and public sector are exempt from employers' national insurance tax rise, but most GPs, many of which are run as small businesses, will be hit. The annual UN Climate Conference is getting underway in Azerbaijan this morning, with world leaders, including Sir Keir Starmer, attending the summit over the next 2 weeks. The climate negotiations are set to discuss funds for poor countries to cope with climate change and increasing ambitions on cutting emissions. The meeting is being held in the wake of weather events, including floods in Valencia and Hurricane Helene in the US. And finally, tributes were paid to the late One Direction star Liam Payne at the MTV Europe Music Awards in Manchester last night. Host Rita Ora said that the pop star was one of the kindest people who had the biggest heart. The singer died at the age of 31 after falling from a third-floor balcony of the Cas Sur Hotel in Buenos Aires, Argentina, last month. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Andrew and Bev.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
It is, of course, Armistice Day, and we're going to be paying tribute to our fallen heroes. There will be a 2-minute silence held across the nation to mark the moment that peace was declared in 1918.
And Sir Keir Starmer will be marking the event in Paris. A bit of history here. He's the first British Prime Minister to do so since Winston Churchill in 1944. But there was a bit of an Armistice Day at the Cenotaph yesterday, Bev. Nigel Farage was very pointedly up on the balcony, whereas other political leaders were laying breeze. But the rule is, if you've got to be a leader of a party which has 6 MPs, he's got 5. But the leader of Plaid Cymru, 2 MPs, and the DUP, 5 MPs. So how did they get to their... But apparently the justification is they wanted all of the United Kingdom to be represented. So Plaid is Wales, DUP, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think that's sensible. It's obviously been controversial. It's seen as a snub. Nigel and Richard Tice, the Reform Party, have said that it shows that they are sidelined, they're being marginalised. In terms of the rules, it was right that Nigel didn't get to lay a wreath, but of course, are the rules correct? Because a lot of people, more people voted for them.
Well, they've got more votes than the Lib Dems, who've got
Exactly.
72 MPs, but that's the voting system we've got. But I suspect that there'll be what they call conversation behind the scenes in the usual channels, and I reckon next year he'll be there. They'll be laying a wreath.
It would be a huge achievement if he was. The bigger conversation is the extent to which the capital E establishment, let's call them that, the political elite, would accept Nigel Farage as being part of the political landscape of this country.
Very keen on military history too, by the way, Nigel Farage. He knows its history very well. And talking of history, so does our current next guest. Dr. Tom Thorpe is the Western Front Association historian. Dr. Tom Thorpe, we've just been hearing the band in the background as they prepare for the ceremony. Tell us who they are and why they're significant militarily.
They are the band of the London Scottish.
Right.
So the London Scottish have a long history. They served in the Great War. They were the first territorial unit to be dispatched to France in the autumn of 1914, and they were the first territorial unit to be involved in action at the Battle of Messines.
Right.
What is the Western Front Association, to viewers who may not know?
So the Western Front Association is a historical charity. We do 2 things. We promote the interest in the First World War, and also we perpetuate the memory of those who served on all sides in all parts of the conflict as part of that conflict.
Just to interrupt you, Dr. Thorpe, we're seeing pictures here of Sir Keir Starmer. This is live from France. What's your assessment of the fact that he is there with President Macron today?
I think that's, it's good because often we don't remember Armistice Day and we don't see its importance. And, obviously Remembrance Sunday is very important, but Armistice Day is also worth remembering, and what happened on that historic day 110 years ago, this very day.
How did Remembrance Sunday overtake Armistice Day in terms of significance? Is it because literally it's easier for people to mark it because it's a weekend?
I think it partly stems from after the Second World War. Obviously, Armistice Day up until 1939 was the conflict that everybody remembered.
Yes.
Obviously, after the Second World War, the Armistice Day loses its sort of direct historical relevance in that way. And so there's always been those 2 days, and sometimes they do coincide, as they did last year.
Right.
Of course, it's in the Commonwealth, it's Remembrance Day. In America, today is called Veterans Day. How important, though, is it, Tom, that we still mark the significance? There'll be children in classrooms all across the world today that will have to put their pens down at 11, hopefully, and observe the 2-minute silence.
Well, I think it is important that we do remember the First World War because it connects all of us. You probably have relatives. Both my grandfathers served in the Great War, one serving in the same brigade as the London Scottish. And again, it marks it has a massive impact on our history, and often we don't remember our history. People look at the First World War, it's all Blackadder, butchers and bungling generals, and it's always much more sophisticated than that. It's a human story that really resonates throughout families and throughout our political life today.
And on the Western Front, soldiers from how many different countries lost their lives?
Large numbers. There was a Portuguese contingent, there were units drawn from across the British Empire, as it was then the modern-day Commonwealth. There was, people from all parts of the globe, and also we must remember the role of non-combatants. The Chinese Labour Corps, people who were contracted from China to come and work behind the trenches for the Allied forces. Also, there was an Indian Labour Corps, and many other units and nationalities were involved in the conflict, even though they didn't serve as combatants.
obviously it's a beautiful day down here in London. We're very, very lucky this morning. We've got the Cenotaph behind us, which everyone will have seen on the television at least yesterday, even if you weren't here in person. We've got Downing Street, which is just a matter of metres away, the gates into Downing Street. What's going to happen here this morning, Tom?
So what's going to happen in about 5 minutes or so, I'm not going to look at my watch, the parties of the Western Front Association will now form up. They will then come in front of the Cenotaph. There will be a short ceremony, and then we have the 2-minute silence. Wreaths will be laid, and then the ceremony will be dismissed for another year.
And who conducts the ceremony?
It is members of the Western Front Association do it. So it's very much done. It's a very short ceremony. Again, we remember those who fell, not just in British and Commonwealth forces, but also those in German, Austro-Hungarian and Russian forces. So we're here to perpetuate the memory, heroism and courage of all combatants who served in the Great War.
And of course, your day job, you're a tour guide in Belfast in Northern Ireland. Big day in Northern Ireland too.
A big day indeed, yes. I mean, we see Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister of the Northern Ireland Assembly, lay a wreath at the Belfast Cenotaph for, I believe, the first time.
Yeah, that's a big moment, because she's Sinn Féin.
Sinn Féin. Not the first time that Sinn Féin have been represented at remembrance ceremonies, but again, significant because, I believe it's the first time that she's done it in her capacity as First Minister.
Tom, it's very easy to assume that everybody knows, but let's just reflect a little bit on why we wear the poppy. What is it about the poppy, the significance of that?
Well, the poppy partly comes from the flowers that you see in France. So when you have large amounts of disruption, artillery fire, trenches, poppy seeds settle and they seed and they turn into these wonderful red flowers, and that's what a lot of veterans saw, and it became a symbol of remembrance in the 1920s when many poppies were made by disabled and wounded veterans as a way for them to actually gain a living and be rehabilitated.
And a symbol of hope, actually, that out of the destruction and the devastation of those landscapes, that life could grow again. And this poppy, which is so resilient but kind of delicate at the same time, it's a beautiful symbol, isn't it?
I think it's a very beautiful symbol, and it means very much to many different people, and it can be controversial, but again, it's a very personal thing.
Why do you think it is controversial? Why can it be controversial?
Well,
I don't understand it.
Well, maybe it's a difficult one. I mean, it depends on your perspective, but if you're, for instance, a nationalist in Belfast, you might see a very different view of it than you may be if you're from the unionist community in Belfast. So again, you could say it promotes war. There are people here who say if you wear a poppy, you promote war.
Yeah.
And it's not something I subscribe to, but again,
I know there's a Green Party MP wearing a white poppy, and she represents Hereford, which is the home of the SAS. I wonder how I suppose that will be controversial, Tom.
I suppose it could be controversial, but the white poppy, I believe, comes into existence in the 1930s, and it's understandable if you served in the trenches of the First World War.
Didn't want ever to go back to that.
Indeed, I think unless you understand and lived through the First World War, it's very difficult to criticise people for wanting to end wars.
The war that was supposed to end all wars.
Indeed.
And you could argue, of course, they fought for the freedom for you to choose to wear a poppy, to not wear a poppy, to wear a white poppy if that's what you wish to wear. The poppy appeal, the British Legion's poppy appeal, started officially in 1921 in terms of selling poppies. And apparently the leaf was added in the 1960s. So before the 1960s, it was just the poppy, and now we see it traditionally with the leaf on now. By 1984, 12 million of them were being sold across the country, which is a fantastic success,
Phenomenal.
Isn't it? It really is.
Yeah.
And the funds now, of course, go to supporting not only former military personnel, but also their families. It's easy on a day like this, in a sense, to forget that the reverberations around war and troops affects thousands of people.
I think that is a really good point. We don't remember the people who came back, who were injured, who were badly traumatised by the experience, and we don't often think about the families who were widowed, the wives who lost husbands, fathers and sons, and the trauma that this had on British society at the time. 1 million people died. This was a phenomenal.
And also many men came back minus limbs, which again was going to have a traumatic effect on families.
And especially at the time, it was disability was seen in very different ways than it is today.
If you're just tuning in, Andrew and I are down at the Cenotaph this morning, of course, on Armistice Day. We're looking at live pictures here of Sir Keir Starmer in Paris, where he is commemorating the occasion today with the President Emmanuel Macron there. Tom, you can see the pictures here. We've just got them on our little monitor down here in Westminster.
And it does seem extraordinary, Tom, that but this is the first time a British Prime Minister has been invited to do this or has agreed to do it since Churchill in 1944, when you consider the close links between Britain and France and how important we helped liberate France.
Indeed. I do find that rather strange in terms of, given what the French sacrificed during the early, 1914, 1915, and, and obviously the impact the British Expeditionary Force had on the war on the Western Front. It was a decisive factor, wasn't the only factor, but it was a decisive factor in the eventual defeat of the German Imperial Army in 1918.
Yeah, really amazing. When I read it, I thought, that can't be right.
Yeah, I wondered why nobody had been in that during that period of time.
Maybe no president thought to invite them, because when Churchill laid the wreath, he was with General de Gaulle, of course, who'd lived in exile in London. Actually used to go to my church, my Catholic church in North London, and they did it together.
Yes, indeed. It is remarkable. Well, I suppose the British Prime Minister has always been connected with events here, and the focus has been on ceremonies in the United Kingdom.
It's a very powerful and potent image that we're seeing here as well. Our new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, with Emmanuel Macron on this day. Obviously, this is post-Brexit, so we're watching this through the prism of what that means for the UK's role, particularly on the European stage. We're also seeing this at a time we have a new American president who is perhaps a little less easy to predict in terms of how the country works together, or whether there is a more sort of isolationist mentality, which might actually be the case in America now. But as we look at this image here, it does show two countries very much united despite Brexit, Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
No, I quite agree. You want good relations because trade and all the rest of it, and both key members of NATO and peace. Yeah, absolutely.
On a day like today.
And of course, this is Macron, who's on his swan song now, because of course his presidency is coming to an end. He's on his second term. Starmer, the new kid on the block, and here we are. They're now, if you're listening on the radio, they're just literally now paying their tribute right now. This is at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in France, in Paris.
Dr. Tom Thorpe is still with us here, the trustee for the Western Front Association. Tom, it's very relaxed here this morning in the Cenotaph. There are police officers, of course, walking around. We had a lovely little sniffer dog came and said hello to us not long ago. How important is the security on an event like this?
I think the security is very important in terms of just in terms of the public safety, making sure that buses, vehicles don't turn into Whitehall. Obviously, there is a heightened security threat, and it's obviously a big event, and we want to make sure this goes off without any embarrassments, any disruption.
And we can hear that band is getting closer. That's the London Scottish band getting closer, and we'll see them at some point.
We will see them. They are magnificent in their hodden grey and kilts. So the traditional, again, a unit set up by people of Scots descent in London in the 1850s, and it serves on the Western Front. Two battalions, one in the Middle East and the other on the Western Front. And again, was a very socially elite unit. People of London Scotch might want to tell you that. You have to be very posh to join.
One of the things I found most touching as we stand here this morning are watching former servicemen come past and salute the Cenotaph as they walk past, just quietly to themselves.
So lovely. It's quite moving, isn't it? Yeah. And we're going to have a look at some of the wreaths that have been laid, of course, including the one by the King yesterday. Tom, lovely to have you with us. Up next, the Kremlin, believe this is an extraordinary story, the Kremlin have denied the phone call which apparently took place between Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin ever happened at all after Trump's election win. It's a bizarre story.
Isn't it?
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. More coming up from us later at the Cenotaph.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout-out to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as the Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. 10:25. Ben Leo now with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Back to Andrew and Bev at the Cenotaph in central London very, very shortly, but let's get through some of the other stories of the day. First of all, though, our latest poll at GB News, of course. We'd love to hear what you think. Every day we'll be running our poll of the day, and today we're asking, should Reform UK have been allowed to lay a wreath at the Cenotaph? We'll be bringing you the live results of that throughout the day, so make sure to stay tuned very shortly. And the final result will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show. For all of our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll. OK, I've got some company. I'm joined by political commentators Judita De Silva and Emma Trimble in the studio. Good morning to you both. Thank you for joining me. Look, stories that are doing the rounds this morning, aside from the Remembrance commemorations, is this Justin Welby scandal. Emma, he was informed of this really sadistic abuser in the Church of England back in 2013. He's being accused of doing nothing about it and is now rejecting calls to resign. Should he go? Should the Archbishop
He absolutely should
be shown the door?
He absolutely should go. I think it's outrageous that he suggested that he has reflected on his behaviour and has decided on reflection that he doesn't need to resign. Not only is it a moral obligation, actually, Fergus Butler-Gailey, who's a Church of England vicar, wrote a very beautiful and eloquent letter urging him to resign. So it's not, it's not just on moral grounds and religious grounds that he should go, but also just as his responsibility as the leader of the Church of England. This does immense damage. Parishioners across the country are really not happy about this. So and he could have behaved differently, and the fact that he didn't and that he's not taking responsibility, I think, is atrocious.
As a reminder for viewers, what happened exactly? There was this chap, John Smith, he abused around 130 boys. Justin Welby was told, Judita, in 2013 about what was going on, and he did nothing about it. He's being accused of covering up the scandal. Yeah. Should he go?
No, I think he absolutely should go, because if you're thinking in your position, in the interest of what people feel about the Church of England, how the parishioners believe in the faith and how they actually follow the Church, whatever you think your moral path has been to finding righteousness or enlightenment, you have to do something for the greater good. It speaks to the position you hold, and that is stepping down, saying that I recognise I've done something that's deplorable because I didn't stand up and use my power in the direction I ought to have. And when you look at the correlations with the Catholic Church, why a lot of people like myself defected from the faith is because that idea of the power should police itself just doesn't work. It makes no sense. And so many of them knew about the priests that were abusing children. And a lot of the functionality that happened within the church is that you ship them off to South America or to Africa. And so seeing the correlations between the two is now going to make people view the Church of England as equally as dysfunctional.
And this guy's he's dead now, so he died in 2018. Those people are not going to see justice. Justin Welby could have done something in order to aid the police in their investigation of this person, and could have made it his cause to champion those men and boys and really push that forward. Instead, he's looking back on this and saying, actually, no, I don't think I need to resign. And it's not just this. I mean, this is coming in a much broader context of dwindling congregations, the church's behaviour over COVID, all sorts of things that show that Justin Welby's leadership is really inadequate. And this, I think, is just the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I mean, it could be argued he's been too busy over the years banging on about government immigration policies and sticking his oar in where it's not welcome, Juditha.
I mean, indeed, because what boggles my mind is that even if let's follow the track of thinking that he has said that he's reflected on it, one of the tenets of Christianity, of the faith, is of children being the most valuable thing, because they are where everything goes. So if you can't even see the protection of them as a priority, then you are fundamentally corrupt.
Moving on back to Armistice Day commemorations. This is Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, in Paris as we speak. Is that Emmanuel Macron next to him? I believe it is. What's your thoughts, Emma, on the fact that Sir Keir Starmer has gone to Paris, the first Prime Minister of Britain since Churchill in the 40s to do so? Lots of our viewers this morning on gbnews.com/your say saying that he should be here, but he was here yesterday. He laid the wreath at the Cenotaph. Is he right to go?
I mean, I'm enjoying seeing the historical moment of one of our prime ministers being in France for the first time since Churchill on Armistice Day. I think that it's actually quite nice in a kind of acknowledgement of the fact that this was the World War. This is something often we do, joint commemorations with other European countries. So I don't think it's that much of an issue that he's not here in London today. As you say, he was there at the Cenotaph yesterday. But it is a remarkable historical moment, and I think it's coming also at a time when this is the first year I've seen really quite heinous commentary online around Armistice Day. Some people saying, oh, the previous generations have died now, there aren't many of them left, and so we just need to move on and stop doing all of this thing, and that Remembrance Day is being fetishised. I think I
know who you're referring to. I won't name him because the guy's a bit of an ice cream, to be fair. But
and so I think there's something quite nice, actually, almost in Keir Starmer sort of returning to on Armistice Day, because this is a commemoration of World War I. We must remember, not World War II as well, and all other conflicts, which is what Remembrance Day is about. Armistice Day is about World War I, and for the men from Britain who fought, they fought primarily in France, and that's sort of. It's quite a beautiful thing to see. Actually.
So why has it not been done before then, Juditha, do you think? The first PM since Churchill, why has nobody else taken it upon themselves to hop across the channel?
I do think this is a direct response to the position he's in geopolitically now, because when you look at from Gaza to Ukraine to migration, there is a understanding that this government has and has to have that solutions will only come with international collaboration. So doing something this poignant and this historically significant sends a message not just to France but to Europe that in the post-Brexit melee, there is still an understanding of unity for where it's fundamentally needed. And also, because we know that Trump episode 2 is coming around, this also optically sends a message to him about a unity that still exists across the European bank. But then it might antagonize him because we know the differences of opinion they have on fundamental things like NATO and defense spending. So I don't know how well this will play with Trump, but I think that it's going to show that conversations need to be had with them as a collective.
I mean, I think Juditha's hit the nail on the head there. This is in response to Trump, surely, and just, getting their ducks in a row, getting their approach to Ukraine in a row, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's enormously symbolic, and we know that Keir Starmer is an arch Europhile and would like us to be not just probably in a closer relationship with Europe, but in the palm of their hands. So I think it's enormously symbolic, maybe perhaps not in the way that I would like it to be. But yes, I do think this is going to send a message to Trump, and we should always look at Keir Starmer, I think, with a slightly cynical eye as to what he might be trying to signal, what chess moves he might be trying to make.
Do you think he's that sort of...
I don't think he's making him sound like Machiavelli. No, he's not. I think that he's...
No, I don't think he's that smart.
He has such a difficult position, because imagine you're in his position now, particularly at this time when you know Trump's coming in. You've got the situation, Gaza, Ukraine. You've got to play both sides effectively, because he's going to have to find a diplomatic route to getting a good connection with Trump. But you've got to also have an understanding with Europe, because you will not solve the problems that are on your plate right now without European collaboration. So what should he do? He has to do very big things optically to show where he stands, because I think the next thing that we're going to see is something to do with Trump.
And it's actually quite canny diplomatically as well, because it's very subtle.
Yeah. Just some breaking news over the past 20 minutes or so. So the Washington Post broke a story yesterday saying Donald Trump had spoken to Vladimir Putin on the phone. Well, in the last 20 minutes, Moscow has come out and said, absolute nonsense, there was no phone call whatsoever. So not too sure what's going on there. Just sticking on Armistice Day and, of course, the services yesterday. What do you think of Nigel Farage being snubbed to laying a wreath? I mean, was that right? The rules say it's because his party doesn't have more than 6.
And I think probably it suggests that the rules aren't correct. The fact that, as Richard Tice has pointed out, that the Reform Party had a larger vote share than the Lib Dems, the DUP, and I think it was Plaid Cymru combined. Even if they only have 5 MPs, they had a much larger share of the vote than the Lib Dems. They represent a significant portion of the country. They are politically significant. And I think, and also as a patriotic party, of course, their supporters will want to see Nigel Farage laying a wreath. I think that the rules should be changed in order that they can. Of course, you do have some exceptions for smaller parties, for devolved parties, with the SNP and the DUP sharing a wreath and placing it alternatively each year. So I think that the issue there is the rules.
Yeah, I mean, they did change the rules, Juditha, and I think it was 1984 with to allow leaders of the devolved nations to lay wreaths, even if they didn't have 6 MPs. I mean, Nigel and Richard Tice from Reform says that this is an establishment stitch-up. Is that
I don't think it's an
fair?
Establishment stitch-up. I think what has happened is that they're currently stranded in a crack, because the electoral structure has to be reviewed 100% to be more reflective of general sentiment of the country. But the whole point about this entire celebration is tradition. It's about protocol. And if you don't fall within the diktats that exist as of today, you can't be there. So you can't have on one side have respect for rules and tradition, and on the other side, because the rules don't work for you, say they're wrong.
Yeah. I do think it's overblown to say that it's a stitch-up, but I think that they're quite right that they should be able to place a wreath.
OK, thank you, you two. Appreciate it. You'll be back in the next hour. Just back on the Justin Welby story. Justin Welby has said the following in a statement. He said, "I'm deeply sorry this abuse happened. I'm so sorry that in places where these young men and boys should have felt safe and where they should have experienced God's love for them, they were subjected to physical, sexual, psychological and spiritual abuse. I had no idea or suspicion of this abuse before 2013. Yes, I mean, we know that, and that's the whole point of the story today. You knew about it in 2013 and did nothing. Lots of you on your say calling for him to resign. Time now for your news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Ben, thank you. Your top stories this hour. The nation will shortly fall silent to mark Armistice Day, honouring the moment peace was declared in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month with a 2-minute silence. A service will take place at the Cenotaph in London, where wreaths will be laid, and senior representatives of the Armed Forces and the Ministry of Defence will attend a service at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. The King led commemorations yesterday at the Cenotaph, where he was joined by members of the royal family and senior politicians. Our reporter Charlie Peters spoke to the Honorary Vice President of the Western Front Association, Lady Lucy French, earlier on.
For me, it is incredibly important. It's vital that we do continue to remember, that we do fall silent at 11 o'clock. It's part of humanity. And the instance that we begin to forget, or I think we're...
Well, the Prime Minister is marking Armistice Day in France today, becoming the first UK leader to do so since Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Keir Starmer is in Paris on the personal invitation of French President Emmanuel Macron. And moments ago, the two leaders were at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at the Arc de Triomphe, where they laid a floral tribute. It comes as the government announces more than £10 million to mark the 80th anniversaries of VE and VJ Day in the UK next year. Sir Keir and President Macron will also discuss the wars in Ukraine and Gaza and President Trump's threat of trade tariffs. And some brief breaking news now. The Kremlin has this morning denied reports that US President-elect Donald Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin, casting the media reports as pure fiction. The Washington Post and Reuters news agency both previously reported that the call had taken place. It comes as Joe Biden is reportedly set to make a personal plea to Donald Trump about the importance of funding Ukraine, urging the president-elect not to walk away from the country. Elsewhere, Defence Secretary John Healey has rejected reported comments by Ukrainian officials suggesting that Kyiv is unhappy with the Labour government's level of support. It comes after The Guardian reported officials in Kyiv have said relations have deteriorated since Labour took office and voiced frustration over Britain's failure to provide additional long-range weapons. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's get your finance report.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2898 and 1.2076 euros. The price of gold is £2,072 and 51 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 8,129 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Welcome back to the Cenotaph. There are more and more people arriving here now this morning. You can see people walking down. The ceremony will be starting here in about 5 or 10 minutes, actually. But we're joined now by London cab driver Lisa Nan-Caro from Poppy Cabs, a charity that is very close to our hearts. We're wearing our Poppy Cabs poppies this morning.
How long have you been driving these Poppy Cabs, Lisa?
Well, Poppy Cabs, a good few years.
Yeah.
I used to do it before I knew that Mike was doing it, just on my own back.
Right.
Then I got a hold of the association and been doing it ever since.
And tell us what you do. You bring veterans to Senate?
Yeah, we start at 6 o'clock in the morning, between 6 and half 6, with a short briefing with Mike.
And that was yesterday?
That was yesterday morning. And then you head off to whatever pickup you're assigned to and take the veterans for free onto down to the Cenotaph, and then afterwards we wait on the bridge and then take them back after it finished.
And you were telling me off air about what are the names that are in the windows that you put in the windows?
The windows. I worked yesterday and last year with an association called Scottish Little Soldiers, and they are the children of veterans that have passed away. So the children come out with a Union Jack with their father or their mother's name on it, and they put them on the window. So this morning, because obviously it's over and I'm back to work, I took them down, but I couldn't, so they're all in my back windows.
Oh, how nice is that?
That is very poignant, though, isn't it? And very, very moving.
Yeah.
Have you been here? You must have been here on the Mondays, on the 11th as well, previously, before, Lisa.
Yes.
How does today compare to yesterday? How does Armistice Day compare to Remembrance Sundays, effectively?
Yeah, for Remembrance Sunday, because we're on the bridge, and there's 400 cabs on Poppy Cabs.
Is that really?
So, over, that's the list that we know of.
Yeah.
After that, there's several others that come and just join on the end and do it. So being on the bridge with that many cab drivers all giving up their day to work for free, to do, which I think is an amazing thing that we do.
And all ages, some of these veterans?
Yeah.
Different
I had
conflicts.
one yesterday, because I've decorated my taxi with a load of poppies that I've stuck on myself.
Oh, right.
And yesterday, an old gentleman walked past and stopped and saluted me.
Oh.
And it was...
We're seeing some of the pictures here.
Okay.
If you're listening on the radio, this is Lisa's taxi covered in... How long does it take to put those poppies on?
Well, me and my son done it. It took a couple of hours.
Did it really? yeah. And it's nice that your son's involved, because how old's your son?
My son is 37. London.
Right, OK.
Yeah.
But, I mean, all generations need to know about why you're doing
well, he's
this.
on the knowledge, and he helped out last year as a steward, as a marshal at the station.
Yeah, look, we can hear the soldiers, they're getting closer, they're marching, and we can hear the band of the London Scottish Regiment in the background. Does it give you goosebumps, Lisa?
All day long.
Does it
All
really?
day, yeah. Yesterday was just full of tears.
Yeah.
It was like one thing happens and something else, and like I say, with the posters in the taxi.
Yeah.
That with a father's name.
We've talked to some veterans who say that they look forward to this day all year round, and they couldn't do it without poppy cabs.
I actually look forward to it every year. It's the one day of the year that makes my job worth doing.
Yeah. And of course, sometimes you bring it, it's not just about men. Of course, there's a lot of female veterans,
of course, yeah.
a lot of women involved in the war in all sorts of logistical ways.
I mean, I've worked, even when poppy cabs are sort of finished, the official side, if I'm working and I'm at the West End and I see a veteran with a medal and they get in, they're not paying.
Oh,
they're not paying.
Aren't you good? Aren't you good? Do you think the country does respect it enough, this great tradition?
I like to think we're getting there. I don't think many people, because even yesterday people were coming up to us asking us, what are you doing?
Really?
And even veterans, when you say getting it's free, they're like, we didn't know nothing about this. So doing what you're doing, getting the word out there, what we do.
And you take them to cenotaph, not just this cenotaph, it'll go to, some of them will go to local commemorations.
And some drivers come in from far outside London and bring them all the way in, and then arrange with them to take them back as well.
Yeah. We're just seeing that the band of the London Scottish getting closer. Are you going to be here all morning for the service? Yeah, of course you are.
I am.
Of course you are. And how long have you been a black cab driver?
24 years.
Have you really?
How is life as a black cab driver these days? Is it tough?
It's okay. It's getting there. After COVID, before COVID, I could feel personally it was going down, but since COVID, we've come back stronger than ever, I believe. Say my son's doing the knowledge, so hopefully he'll be out with us one day. So
well, we swear by black cabs, don't we, Bev?
We do. Those ones you can hail on your phone, not so reliable these days, Lisa.
No,
I'm just putting it out there. So, of course, we are here down at the Cenotaph. It's the annual service of remembrance, 11th of the 11th. We will, of course, be taking 2 minutes silence at 11 o'clock this morning. We want to tell you a little bit about what's happening this morning. There will be this 2 minutes silence. Charlie Peters is going to come and join us now to let us know what is going to be
when the bugler sounds the last post, that would be a moving moment, because all around us we can see hundreds of veterans who are here. Some of them have been here for the second day because they'd have been here for Remembrance Sunday yesterday. But this is the day that was deemed Armistice Day, signing that armistice on the 11th of the 11th.
A chilling statistic that I heard this morning was from between the agreement of the peace and signing the peace between 5 a.m. with the agreement and signing at 11. 2,000 soldiers lost their lives when actually peace had been declared. Charlie Peters joins us now. Charlie, what's going to happen here this morning?
Well, we're expecting a parade shortly. We're seeing now those 4 soldiers from the Irish Guards standing at attention around the cenotaph, as you'd expect. We also have the pipes and drums of the London Scottish Regiment just around the corner on Charles Street by the Foreign Office. They'll be joining shortly. They were the first territorial army unit to fight in the First World War. Their battle honours are actually celebrated on the 31st of October. So a significant moment for them to be a part of this parade today. And then, as you said, we will have that 2 minute silence as the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month is marked.
And do you know this traditional, the horses that we've seen? There will be horses, and look at those sentries. Absolutely, it's completely still. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop. Those sentries, and you can always feel the atmosphere that it's almost getting tense. The expectation. More people coming out now, Charlie.
Yes, they're all from the Ministry of Defence's main building. So you've got soldiers and civil servants surrounding this area, and I think you have to remember that for much of our modern history, since 1980, Armistice Day has not been a feature of our process of remembrance. In 1946, we did away with Armistice Day. We replaced it with Remembrance Sunday, and it was only because of the Western Front Association. Their campaign brought it back in 1994. This is the 30th year that we've actually done it since the Second World War. So it's been resuscitated as our approach to commemorating the Great War.
And I think it is important, it is significant for the younger generation to know the 11th of the 11th at 11 a.m. It is something that there's no excuse not to remember that for the younger people today. And we will be taking that 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock this morning. Obviously Whitehall here, obviously closed to all vehicles this morning. There are various security officials in place. And do we know who these troops are around the Cenotaph?
Sure. They're the Irish Guards. They're the Irish Guards. So part of the household division.
Here's the pipes and drummers here with the gun. Now that is a stirring sound. What a stirring sound.
And as they're marching now, we have to remember that in this period, the final hour of the Great War, they were still fighting. They were fighting to the very end of the armistice process.
Bev was making the point, a chilling statistic, that when it was agreed there was going to be peace at 5 o'clock, but the armistice wasn't signed till 11 o'clock, and in those 6 hours, another 2,000 young men died. How terrible. Here they come. They're coming in full view. What's an extraordinary. In their kilts, their traditional Scottish gear.
But this is the London Scottish pipes and drums, so they wear a flodden grey, so a very peculiar tartan in a way, unique to the units.
And they're being followed by, we've got the Navy, the Army and the Royal Air Force following them too. It's an amazing sight. So that sound needs no introduction. The bagpipes of the London Scottish. And they are saluting the Cenotaph. Very moving. So these are members of the Western Front Association joining alongside serving soldiers, serving members of the RAF, serving members of the Royal Navy, following the band of the London and Scottish, the band of the London Scottish. And these are members of the Western Front Association, which is a charity set up to make sure we remember. So this is now children from a local school, all with their poppies on, joining in with the Western Front Association. If you're listening on the radio, they're now in front of the Cenotaph, the band of the London and Scottish, the bagpipes, that distinctive sound. We're getting ready for the last post, which will be sounded at 11 o'clock.
We're also seeing now religious communities and representatives from other nations entering Whitehall from Charles Street, from the Foreign Office entrance as crowds fill out around the Cenotaph, preparing to pay their respects to the war dead from the Great War.
So we're going to speak we're speaking quietly. We've now got literally thousands of people here out opposite the cenotaph. Members of the Royal Navy, the Army, and the Royal Navy Air Force, Army. Also members of the Western Front Association, which was set up to effectively make sure we never forget what happened in that awful First World War. Millions of people died on the Western Front. They're standing in silence because they're building up now to the last post, which will be sounded at 11.
And Andrew, the Western Front Association ensured that Armistice Day was reinstituted in Britain after an extensive period where it was removed from our period of national remembrance.
Because Armistice Day was conceived after the First World War. It was the treaty that ended the First World War, which was meant to be the war that ended all wars. Then after the Second World War, that's when Armistice Day almost evaporated, Charlie.
That's right, yeah.
And the Western Front effectively brought it back. And what, we've had it back now 30 years?
30 years. This is the 30th year since its return in 1994.
Yeah.
And it's poignant, in fact, that we have Sir Keir Starmer in France on this day, with the first Armistice Day commemorations being made in 1919.
And it's extraordinary that he's the first British Prime Minister to be invited to France since Winston Churchill stood alongside Charles de Gaulle, who was led France in exile in London during the Second World War back in 1944. And we're just waiting, the crowds here are waiting in silence because we're going to get the last post on the dot of 11 o'clock when hopefully the whole nation will fall silent. A lot of these people, Charlie, are cadets.
Yes, they are. We're seeing representatives from many of the major local units in London. Among those cadet forces, Sea Cadets, Royal Air Force. I've seen cadets from the Royal Lancers and the Intelligence Corps gathering here as well, showing the unbroken link across generations for the spirit of commemoration and remembrance.
And of course, just yesterday, with these beautiful reeds, the King led the nation on Remembrance Sunday as the Princess of Wales gazed down from the balcony above us. And it's interesting, John, you can see lots of people in these Whitehall buildings pulling the curtains back to have a look what's going on. So we're waiting now for the last post, which comes, the bugler will sound the last post at 11. Everyone is waiting in silence. The band has stopped. Can we bring in... Yeah.
OK, it is a very solemn occasion, obviously, down here this morning at the Cenotaph. There will be an official silence in about 2 minutes' time. The crowd amassed here, thousands of people here this morning down at Whitehall, already standing in complete silence. Obviously a very significant occasion for everybody who's here this morning. You might have seen a few little children there at the front of the Cenotaph. They are from the King's Edward School in Louth and Priory LSST in Lincoln and Lincolnshire ACF. Other members of the community, the military community who are here this morning, it's the Combined Cadet Forces and the Peterborough Sea Marine Cadet Corps. I've made my way to the back of the crowd here. Obviously you can hear a pin drop down here at the Cenotaph this morning. Immense sense of reverence, respect and reflection for those who've lost their lives in service of this country. And so the second bugler there signalling the end of the 2-minute silence. There'll now be another laying of the wreaths. And then there'll be prayers which are led by Brother Nigel Cave this morning. Charlie Peters is joining me now. Charlie, who's laying the wreaths now?
So they're laying the reeds. They're laying the reeds now, which represents Football Memorial, Muslim groups, British West Indian Trust, Chinese Sikh groups, the Western Front Association members, also representing the youth of the nation. We shouldn't forget the youth of the nation because, of course, this Armistice Day represents what happened when the peace treaty was signed in 1918, the war to end all wars, which sadly never happened. So it's so important that young people are involved in this. There are school children here too. They'll be involved as well. Members of the Combined Cadet Forces, yet again, of course, the young generation. The Peterborough Sea Marine Cadet Corps are here. We've got Sikh groups, Royal Navy, Army and Royal Air Force representatives, of course. And the school actually is King Edward's School from Louth Priory in Lincolnshire. So they've travelled a long way for today, and they look very smart in their school uniforms, wearing their poppies and their red jumpers, and their teacher barking orders at them. They're continuing to lay their reeds now, and of course the reeds are very close to the reeds laid by King Charles and other dignitaries only yesterday. They're laying these reeds right now, standing back, looking very smart, and I think this is going to take some time. They're all being called in order. It's very still, it's very quiet as people pay their respects to the fallen. We've now got a group, this is a very young group. They're about to lay their reeds too. And this has all been organised by the Western Front Association, which, as we were saying earlier, is responsible for reviving the tradition of Armistice Day celebrations, because it faded away after the Second World War, but was brought back 30 years ago. This is the 30th anniversary, and I think it's a really important anniversary. Don't you, Bev? Bev, think it's a really important anniversary that they're doing this now on Armistice Day?
Yep, Charlie Peters is with us now. Charlie, we're watching the children go forward now. Lovely to be selected on a day like this to be some of those chosen to come down and show your respects.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also it's worth noting that a lot of people who work on recovering the history of the Great War will often reflect that only a particular brand of the First World War is taught in our schools. They're taught to see it as just an abyss of suffering, that it was just an appalling era of punishment. But 1918 was also a year of great military victory for the United Kingdom and for its allies, and that this is obviously a disaster in our civilization, but it was also a moment of victory. And the people who are being remembered today are being remembered not only for having died and been wounded, but also for fighting and winning, for achieving something great for the country.
There are literally thousands of people here. The crowd has grown as the mornings go, and it's a very chill November day. It's a very chill November day, but the crowd has grown and grown and grown. And actually, what's really encouraging is to see so many young people amongst the crowd. Lots of very young people. I'm not talking about the cadets who are here in their uniforms, but young people who've just taken the opportunity to be here to experience this part of extraordinary history. It's very poignant, Bev, don't you think? Poignant is the word.
It is, and to some extent I feel it's a little bit more meaningful maybe than yesterday, and what I mean by that is we saw the dignitaries all laying their wreaths yesterday, but actually they will never have to have loved ones necessarily in wars or lose their lives. The people that we're seeing here today are the true human face of our military organisations and our historical organisations who play a really important part in this country. The people who are here today all want to be here. They don't have to be here.
And I was thinking as well, look at those cadets. Some of those cadets in a few years' time could be expected to take up arms for king and country in a far-flung war. And in fact, some of those cadets are now moving towards the cenotaph. Is it their turn now to lay some reeds? I think it is, because they're marching now. Some cadets Royal Air Force Army cadets. One of them is female, marching very smartly towards the cenotaph to lay their wreaths. And there's a young girl at the end. I don't quite know which part of this organisation she's from, but this is the youth, and of course they could be, in a few years' time, fully fledged members of the armed services required by to serve king and country in a theatre of war. And we've seen many people here, of course, who've been served in theatres of war. Many of them have traumatic stress conditions and physical ailments because of the war. So this is the next generation, which is why it's so important they're here and are represented at the cenotaph today.
It was oddly moving, actually, when the troops started to come down there after the bugler. It was to see the discipline contained within these soldiers, within the military, the training that goes into it, the commitment, the loyalty to your country, to be literally prepared to lay down your life so that we can all live in this amazing country that we are so fortunate to live in.
And we see these brilliant soldiers, and we know that successive governments have allowed this army to wither to its smallest size since Napoleonic times, which is shameful in my view. So those cadets have returned to their place. This wreath laying has now been going on for 7 or 8 minutes, and people are still standing attentively, quietly, paying their respects. And you can see members of the Sikh community over there. And there's a lot of medals over there, Charlie Peters, a lot of medals.
Yeah, we've seen people filing out of the Ministry of Defence's main building all morning to prepare for this. I've been here since about 6 a.m, where the preparation started well in advance of sunrise. And yeah, you're seeing officers and soldiers of all three services represented here around the cenotaph, paying their respects, but also continuing the tradition of the war dead they are honouring this morning. They are looking on and remembering those who wear the same uniform as them and who fought for the same colours as them over 100 years ago during the Great War. And
I think we can see Brother Nigel Cave getting ready just to the right of where we are at the cenotaph. He'll be leading the prayers in just a moment.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a poignant moment for all involved here, and
those prayers will have to reflect the fact that this is interdenominational, because there's members of the Muslim community are laying wreaths here, the Sikh community, the Jewish community, the Christian community. So those prayers will have to reflect that.
And Andrew, that's part of the reason why the cenotaph was never dedicated. It is a multi-religious commemoration of the war dead, because if we look at it now here, we see Roman laurels and we can see the Latin in the top, but there is no religious association for the cenotaph. It is designed to reflect the millions from around what was then the Empire and its allies who fought for freedom and for the Allied side.
Entering the little ornamental gate fence around the cenotaph, on each pillar there's a crown, because of course they serve the monarch of the day, the armed forces, be it Queen Elizabeth II or now Charles III, and of course it reminds us that the royal family were here en masse yesterday. A very important part of their role is being colonel-in-chiefs of endless regiments, and it was great to see the Princess of Wales here too, wasn't it, yesterday?
Yeah, she looked tired.
She did look tired.
She looked really tired.
Tough, yeah.
Not surprisingly, but yeah, it was great to see her there.
And there was that great moment as she was leaving the balcony, the Countess of Wessex putting her hand on her back. Seniority.
Yeah.
But also reassuring.
And yeah, protecting and kindness.
Yeah,
it was a real sort of moment of affection, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Against the backdrop of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing we'll hear will be prayers, which will be led by
Brother Nigel Cave. Yes.
And
incredibly reverential mood here this morning.
When do you ever hear central London so silent? No, there's what we call a Chelsea pensioner now being led to the cenotaph to lay his own wreath. So he'll be a good age. He'll be probably in his 90s, if not even older. And that really that is one of the last links with the Second World War, let alone the First World War. And that's a very moving moment. And he's with some younger ex-servicemen. And the Chelsea, are they going to help? So the Chelsea pensioner is now laying the wreath, and he lays it himself. God love him. They're standing now, bowing at the cenotaph. Very moving. And there's Big Ben, striking. That must be, I think that probably signals time for prayers. You just don't hear central London this quiet, do you?
Never.
Extraordinary.
It is extraordinary.
More reeds being laid. They're being laid on the other side from where we are. We're on the side of Downing Street, of course. Of course, the Prime Minister's not there. He is in Paris. He's laying a wreath, and has done. He's laying a wreath with Emmanuel Macron. Historic moment for Keir Starmer, the first British Prime Minister to do that since Winston Churchill did the same with President de Gaulle, General de Gaulle, as he was then, back in 1944. Quite extraordinary that it's taken so long for that to happen again.
Yes, and I have to say that Armistice Day is more of a celebration in France than it is here. It's their national day. And we should also consider the wider international reflections that take place today. Romania takes Armistice Day very seriously. The Serbians do as well.
Just now, this is the prayers now beginning, and they're being in the capable hands of Brother Nigel Cave.
We welcome you to this Armistice Day service of remembrance. Remembrance is both the motto and the inspiration of the Western Front Association, and there is no better way to show this than in today's simple yet heartfelt ceremony. This year marks the 30th occasion when the WFA has organised this commemoration. It came about through the persistent determination of the then WFA chairman, Tony Noyes, who managed to get a wreath-laying ceremony on this day approved by the powers that be, ably supported by a few highly motivated people. It has now grown into a significant event, along with the service that follows at the Guards Chapel. I am sure that Tony and those early pioneers would be gratified to see how this cenotaph service has developed, yet always keeping as central to it, remembering the sacrifice of so many, through the destructive impact of the Great War. Today is very close to the 110th anniversary of the ending of the First Battle of Ypres, which itself marked the ending of the major campaigning at the outbreak of the war. It is close to the last days of the Somme Battle of 1916 and of the Third Battle of Ypres, or Passchendaele, in 1970. Let us pray. We give praise to Almighty God, whose purposes are good, whose power sustains the world he has made, who loves us though we have failed in his service, who gave Jesus Christ for the life of the world, who by his Holy Spirit leads us in his way. As we give thanks for his great works, we remember those who have lived and died in his service and in the service of others. We pray for all who suffer and are in need. We ask for his help and blessing that we may do his will and that the whole world may acknowledge as Lord and King. We remember with thanksgiving and sorrow those whose lives in world wars and in conflicts past and present have been given and taken away. We pray for all who, in bereavement, disability and pain, continue to suffer the consequences of fighting and terror. Even in these days of brutal warfare in Eastern Europe and the Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Sudan and in Burma, and elsewhere in this deeply troubled world. We pause to recall the traumas that so many suffered through the immediate post-war years, of those who carried long-term physical and mental wounds, of families and loved ones who never fully recovered from the loss of a husband, father, brother, mother or sister, and of the many who were abandoned to the consequences of poor economic conditions in the 1920s and 30s. We give thanks to God for the many organisations, small and big, which have been dedicated to those who have sacrificed their lives, or their health, or their limbs in their service to the nation. We acknowledge the inspiration that gave birth to the Imperial War Graves Commission and acknowledge and appreciate its continuing mission as the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Its task signifies an eternal obligation by the states of the Commonwealth, remembrance and commemoration in physical form. We commit ourselves to work in penitence and in faith for reconciliation between the nations, that all people may together live in freedom, justice and peace. Ever-living God, we remember those whom you have gathered from the storm of war into the peace of your presence. May that same peace calm our fears, bring justice to all peoples, and establish harmony among the nations. We make these our petitions through Christ our Lord. Amen.
And death shall have no dominion. Dead men naked, they shall be one with the man in the wind and the west moon. When their bones are picked clean and the clean bones gone, they shall have stars at elbow and foot. Though they go mad, they shall be sane. Though they sink through the sea, they shall rise again. Though lovers be lost, love shall not. And death shall have no dominion. And death shall have no dominion. Under the windings of the sea, they lying long shall not die windily. Twisting on racks when sinews give way, strapped to a wheel, yet they shall not break. Faith in their hands shall snap in two, and the unicorn evils run them through. Split all ends up, they don't crack, and death shall have no dominion. And death shall have no dominion. No more may gulls cry at their ears, or waves break loud on the seashore. Where blew a flower, may a flower no more lift its head to the blows of the rain. Though they be mad and dead as nails, heads of the characters hammer through daisies. Break in the sun till the sun breaks down, and death shall have no dominion.
Western Front Association will now lead the procession away from the cenotaph. In fact, let's listen.
As we that are left grow old, age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Who will sound sunset as they prepare to leave the cenotaph. Expecting to hear from the bugler any moment now, because that lone piper was playing the lament, "The Flowers of the Forest." Beautiful and very moving it was too. Are. So, getting ready now for the bugler. So the cenotaph bathed in sunshine, even though it's very, very cold. We've actually seen in the last couple of minutes, actually, one of the veterans keeled over, and also one of the young cadets also keeled over. It's all the tension and the emotion, I imagine. So we're waiting now for the bugler to sound the sunset. Big Ben again, so I think when Big Ben is struck, we'll hear from the bugler. The estimate is 2,000 people here today, which is a pretty remarkable number. Any moment now. No, we've got the Western Front Association are now processing from the cenotaph. There we are. So.
The pipes and drums of the London Scottish now piping up as members of the congregation gathered here begin to leave at the closing prayer of this service to commemorate Armistice Day, the end of the Great War. Now, Armistice was signed at 5 a.m. on Monday, the 11th of November in 1918, and the fighting continued until 11 a.m., with the last casualty falling just minutes before that treaty came into effect. Some of the stories of the end of the First World War are so tragic in how they fell. One man, a messenger, was given a note by his officer to let the troops know that at 11 a.m. the guns would fall silent and they'd be served a large meal behind the trench lines. And as he ran to deliver that message to the troops on the front, he was shot by a sniper. Again, just in the final hour of the war. There's another story of a sergeant in the US military demoted to corporal, and he wanted in the final moments of the war to regain his rank, to show some heroism and charge the lines one last time. He also fell in the moments, in the hours before the closing of the Great War, where millions fought and fell. Now, this morning we've been speaking to so many members of the Western Front Association and those linked to them, and they're all very grateful that this is the 30th return of Armistice Day. For many years, almost 50 years, we did not commemorate this occasion at the Cenotaph. From 1946 onwards, Remembrance Sunday took hold of this process. Armistice Day disappeared and it was captured by the remembrance process for the Second World War. But the Great War, many felt, was falling out of our national consciousness. It was falling out of our collective memory. And so Armistice Day was reconstituted by those here today. The Western Front Association ensure that the memories of those who fought for the United Kingdom, for the Empire and its allies are remembered with this stirring parade, with the pipes and drums of the London Scottish, the first territorial army unit to go into combat on Messines Ridge. And they celebrate their annual battle honour on the 31st of October. So when many Britons are celebrating Halloween at a hall in Westminster, Hundreds of men and women will wear the Flodden grey of the London Scottish, the drums I can hear to my right, and they will honour those who fought in the First Battle of Ypres. Now, we've also heard many people this morning, part of the Western Front Association, who aren't particularly happy with how the First World War is remembered by this country. They think all too often there is that feeling of it being lions led by donkeys. It was just an appalling slaughter. But for many people who fought in that war, it was a great triumph that they won. And General Haig, who is often seen by many as the chief of those donkeys, the worst, as it were, of those army generals, is in fact considered a great hero by the veterans of that campaign. And he was a pallbearer for the unknown soldier who arrived at Victoria Station. And he dedicated the rest of his life, General Haig, Sir Douglas Haig, to supporting the wounded who fought in that First World War. Now, we've seen many of the new wreaths at the cenotaph, which includes also a dedication from the Army Football Association. Now, it's interesting that that wreath has been selected to be laid here, and it points to the community links between the First World War and the towns and cities and villages across the country who sent so many of their fighting men to engage in that combat. Football associations, football clubs often lost their entire teams engaging in that conflict. And so it's vital, I think, that the Army FA was a part of that process. We're seeing now the final members of the military procession begin to leave here as 4 soldiers from the Irish Guards remain on parade at attention, with a sergeant leading them from behind. Okay.
So the mood lifts actually slightly, doesn't it, Andrew?
Yeah.
Very solemn, and then a sense of reflection and celebration that we live as a free country because of the lives that were lost for us.
And I thought I was really struck by the generational divide here, from very old people, veterans, to very young people, cadets who will be shouldering the burden of the nation's military future in years to come. Always stirring and emotional and poignant to hear a bagpipe.
And I don't know about you, but I haven't been present at an Armistice Day celebration before. I was very moved, actually, especially when the troops first started coming in, all marching in unison with such reverence. It was incredibly poignant.
And saluting as they passed the cenotaph, which was, again, very, very moving. And the colours were fantastic. 2,000 people here. When you consider 35 years ago, we weren't even marking Armistice Day, which is extraordinary. So well done to the Western Front Association, which are now making this an integral part of our military lived experience and history. Remarkable.
Yep, quick word from Charlie Peters with us now. We do this kind of occasion incredibly well here in the UK, don't we? We have a lot to be grateful for.
Nobody does it better, Andrew. You said it before I could get that in. And I would say the thing that I find most moving about these events is you see plenty of soldiers serving and former with their medals on their chest, but you also see plenty of elderly folk with their relatives' medals on the other side of their chest. Those campaign medals you'll never see on serving soldiers now because the time has passed such that it would be impossible. But you can see those stars that were being worn by soldiers who fought in 1914 to 1918, and to see those memories recovered for today and brought forward into our national memory is always, it's a treat really to see those names and those medals recognised on Whitehall.
Just seeing the people walking past, that's a lot of what we call the lobby, going in for their briefing at number 10. They'll be talking to the Prime Minister's official spokesman, and I'm sure as they're looking at us, they'll be talking a bit about, I imagine they'll be talking about the Armistice Day and the fact that the Prime Minister must remember he's part of history today because he's the first British Prime Minister to mark Armistice Day in France alongside the French presidents, and Winston Churchill stood alongside General de Gaulle in 1944. Have to say, why did it take so long?
Absolutely right. Thank you, Charlie. I think you're sticking with us, aren't you? Don't go anywhere. You stick with us as well. We're just going to take a very quick break.
Hello and welcome back to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Last week we had the anticyclonic gloom. The next few days we've still got high pressure, this time without the gloom. It's much brighter for many of us. Still some patchy cloud around because we've got some areas of cloud floating around the high pressure from the Atlantic. But as this front clears, it clears the low cloud, the really gloomy stuff. So a much brighter day to come for the vast majority. Still some low cloud and mist clinging onto the southwest of Cornwall. But elsewhere across the UK, well, yeah, there's some high cloud about, but otherwise it's a brighter day with some decent sunny spells developing and feeling pleasant enough in the sunshine, although a cold wind blows through the north of Scotland and down the North Sea coast. That wind will also bring some showers into the far north of Scotland and also eastern parts of England prone to 1 or 2 showers as we end the day. But for the vast majority, it's a dry and clear end to Monday. Already by this stage, some mist patches starting to form across Northern Ireland, Northern England, central and southern Scotland. And really with those clear skies remaining overnight and a relatively cold airflow, we're going to see increasingly some mist and fog developing, especially for Ireland and into the West Midlands, Northern England, central and southern Scotland. Where that fog forms, it will be dense with some poor visibility by dawn. Equally, we've got a few showers rolling into the southeast of England, but elsewhere, away from the fog and away from the showers, temperatures dipping close to freezing. So a chilly start to Tuesday, and the fog, where it ends up, will be slow to clear, especially for Northern Ireland and central Scotland. But away from the foggy areas, well, plenty of bright weather once again. A few more showers into the southeast and a cold wind here, but in the sunshine elsewhere, feeling pleasant enough.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.11:41, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew Bisbee. We're at the Cenotaph, where we had this remarkably poignant, very special service. It is, of course, Armistice Day. Just walked past was the Defence Secretary, John Healey. We tried to get him to talk to GB News, but he apparently was very busy. But he laid a wreath. He was part of dozens of people who laid a wreath. And with us now is Dr. Tom Thorpe from the Western Front Association. Tom, you must be thrilled, because 35 years ago this didn't exist. It was because of your organisation, your charity, that we now mark Armistice Day here and around the country.
I mean, we certainly do this ceremony, and we know this is a wonderful thing, to do it and to go back and use this time to remember and reflect. But obviously, there are many other organisations that are involved in the remembrance.
Remind us why Armistice Day almost fell out of fashion, because it reflects the peace treaty being signed at 11 o'clock on the 11th day, 11th month. But after the Second World War, it sort of faded away.
It fades away, I think, partly because obviously the conflict in living memory then in the 50s, 60s, 70s is the Second World War. That's what most people have fought, and veterans in the First World War are becoming retired and then they're no longer working. So, it's a passing of a generation in a way.
Yeah. Why do you think it is important that we still remember and mark and reflect what happened in that First World War, which they call the Great War, the war to end all wars, which of course sadly didn't?
Unfortunately it didn't. I think it's important to remember because it's all very much part of our history, and we need to know our history. There's been a lot of, recent moves to not teach the First World War and not understand what massive cultural, political and economic legacy it has in shaping Britain as the country it is today.
Yeah. I think we should allow our cameramen just to see what's going on behind us now, Tom. If you can, there's obviously a photo call here. If you could just talk us through a little bit of what might be happening now that the official ceremony is over.
Well, as far as I know, there's we have various units and representations, military representations that have come here to lay wreaths, and we have over to our right is the London Scottish, the wonderful band of the London Scottish, and they've done sterling work. And we also got other delegations of cadets.
And we've got cadets here, Tom, which is really important because that's the next generation of soldiers, sailors and Air Force men and women.
We've actually had a number of schools laying wreaths, even a couple from the Republic of Ireland.
How nice.
The remembrance is becoming more important in the Republic of Ireland. And we've had representation from many other groups, West Indian, Chinese Labour Corps representatives, and other delegations who have also laid wreaths.
We saw Sikh turbans. Years ago you might call it the League of Nations, and that's important to reflect that so many other nations were involved in this conflict. What's now known as the Commonwealth were hugely involved in the Second World War and the First World War.
Indeed, and it's important that they remember their legacy and their important role in that conflict. And often their histories are obscured by political developments, and it's only more recently that countries like Ireland, India are now understanding and reflecting on their role in these.
You must be very pleased with all this.
Today is
job well done.
It's all gone off like clockwork as usual, and it takes a great deal of effort. And if people want to come along next year, we'd love to see them.
We always say this, Tom. Nobody does it better than Britain. Military pageantry.
Can't go wrong.
Right, Dr. Tom Thorpe, it's been lovely to meet you this morning. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing, for joining us here on GBNews this morning. Up next, we're going to be seeing how cities across the UK have paid their respects today.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
So one of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
I have a lot of farms near St. Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back to London, to the Cenotaph, where we've just watched the very moving, very poignant, very beautifully organised Armistice Day ceremony here. Let's go up to the northwest of England now. Sophie Reaper will tell us what's been going on up there. Sophie.
Well, a very good morning to you. We're here at the Cenotaph in Manchester this morning, where, as I'm sure you saw down in London, we had a very moving, beautiful 2 minutes of silence here as part of Armistice Day remembrance. There were a few hundred people gathered around the Cenotaph here, some military veterans, but also just some members of the public who'd chosen to come along this morning to take in those couple of minutes of silence. The last post was played and then that silence fell, and it was really, really beautiful. And even since then, we've been seeing a steady stream of people coming to the Cenotaph, laying wreaths, and just below, you may not be able to see here, but laying small crosses bearing poppies, some with handwritten messages of commemoration to their loved ones who perhaps have lost their lives either during one of the world wars or maybe in more recent conflicts as they risked their lives giving their service to our country. So an incredibly moving, an incredibly poignant day here in Manchester.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sophie. And we're going to go up to Scotland now. Tony Maguire's there in Scotland. I think Tony's joining us from Edinburgh, one of my favourite cities. Tony, what's been happening there this morning?
Good morning. Well, certainly we had another really lovely, quite humble and melodic remembrance service here on Armistice Day. At the 11th hour and the 11th minute, we heard the sound of the pipes. We had the lowering of the banners, and we had a lovely service as well to mark the moment. We then had quite a small collection of people who came and they laid their wreaths in the Remembrance Garden that you can see behind me. And you know, we were talking to Dr. Claire Armstrong earlier on. She's the CEO of the Royal British Legion Scotland, and she was saying that year on year, since she's been in charge for about the last 6 or 7 years, there's been a real continued growth in the number of people who want to come and pay their respects. And certainly today, you know, right around these gardens, well, the crowd was about 8 deep, and certainly lined all the way along Princes Street behind me for people just to stop in. And certainly it was, you know, really extremely quiet during those couple of minutes, which, given the news of the last couple of days, a lot of people I think here were quite concerned about. Now, certainly yesterday, the Celtic away fans, well, they broke a minute's silence after just 9 seconds. That was called off by chanting pro-IRA songs, and that had a lot of people extremely upset given the nature of that occasion. But certainly here in Edinburgh today, everybody was here to be part of the moment, here to remember, here to pay their respects. And then shortly after that lovely service, well, members of the public came in and laid their own wreaths and their poppies by their loved ones, or perhaps just by organisations that they kind of feel affiliated with. But certainly here in Edinburgh as well, compared to last year, the sun was out, the mood was high for this really lovely, quite moving service in places, with some lovely singing and of course the pipes, which is enough anywhere in Scotland to really set the tone for the remainder of the morning.
All right, Tony, thanks for that. That's Tony Maguire joining us from Edinburgh, because these celebrations, commemorations have been going on all around the country, but none more so poignant, I think. But we were very lucky and privileged to be here at the Cenotaph.
Absolutely. Yeah, the security barriers are up now around the Cenotaph, so that's protecting all of that now. There's a couple of school children who've just been in there getting one last-minute photograph taken. Amazing memories which are created for all of the people who've been in attendance today, particularly the youngsters, particularly the young cadets. Some of them, you know, barely teenagers, frankly. So those memories carry on, and that sense of our nationality, of our pride in our country also carries on for another year as well.
Every religion and colour, Muslims, Sikhs, Jewish people, fantastic. Around 2,000 people had crowded into the Senate, into Whitehall. You don't hear Whitehall this quiet normally, do you? You just don't. It's been a remarkable occasion and just reminds us of how important it is that we remember our fallen, our heroes.
Thank you for all watching with us this morning and joining us. Emily and Tom are here to take over, and we'll be back on air in the studio at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Well, it's a busy day of news, and although, of course, today is Remembrance Day, we're thinking forward as well. We're thinking to the wars that are really affecting us today. What does this Macron and Starmer meeting hold for the future of Ukraine?
Yes, and Keir Starmer, he's also off to Azerbaijan for the big climate conference, the big annual climate conference. And guess what? What do they want? They want more money from us, from the British taxpayer, towards climate change everywhere else in the world. But guess what? China, India and the US aren't there.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after a cloudy few days, there is some blue sky on the way as we head through the rest of this week. High pressure still very much in charge of our weather as we head over the next couple of days, bringing us those more settled conditions that we might see throughout today with plenty of sunshine around. We have seen a weather front just sinking southwards overnight, that eventually clearing the far southeast of England, and perhaps one or two showers just skirting the eastern coast of England as well. But for most of us, a dry and bright day with plenty of blue skies and plenty of sunshine on offer. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, but still feeling very pleasant in that sunshine. As we then go into Monday evening, still just a touch of cloud across the very far southwest of England, but for the majority of Scotland, it will be staying dry with plenty of